All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. It's In Tune with Joon, number 18, the podcast for millennials and Zoomers by millennials and Zoomers. We always like to give you that slice of life, things that are relevant to the times. So the topic for today is how we would want to see police funds reallocated. And the way that we're going to do this is simply by giving our opinions, some data based, but once again, we never require our guests to do prior research. So it's based off of what we've heard, what we've seen, and how we feel. Today, I have recurring guests, familiar face we haven't seen for a long time. Give it up for the pretty Monica-san. Say hi.
Oh, sorry. Hi.
There you go. And we have two more pretty faces. We'll start with the pretty boy, Keon. What's up? All right, what's up? What's up? And let's finally say hi to the pretty girl, Zara. What's up?
Kia.
All right. We are ready to jump right into it. Zara sent us a very cool paper to read, and I wish I could have read it before because it goes into great detail about, mass incarceration, policing. But let's start by just making it clear. What does defund the police mean? Well, to me, defund the police does not mean let's abolish police and let's, let anarchy reign loose. I don't think that is what most people mean by defund the police. But what I do think it means is that police have substantially larger budgets than most other public services. So why don't we focus on maybe evening the distribution and targeting areas that need more funding by drawing that pool from the police fund? And a classic question asked by people who don't believe that we can fund anything is where are we going to pay for, how are we going to pay for that? Where are we going to get that money? It's there. We just need to focus on the right causes and on the right services. So that's what we mean by defund the police. It's shifting funds from the police to other sectors that might need it more. Now, that being said, does anyone have some first ideas about something they want to share where they would like to see police funds reallocated? Yeah.
Well, my my idea of reallocating money to I was thinking of more like communities that have low property tax, and it'd be like a decade process where you'd start putting jobs into these communities where people can make money and then redevelop the communities so these people can pay their taxes. And at the end of the day, with property tax going up, education will be funded with the property tax. So you'll have those poor communities that used to be poor, education is getting funded, and we hope that jobs will be created. So that's what so putting into communities to refurbish communities with low property tax.
So you said that the property tax could then be used for education. Is that right?
I mean, property tax is used. What I've learned is that each district, they get their money from property tax. That's where they get most of their funding from. So it makes sense that Agora Hills has a really good high school because of the fact that there's great communities around Agora Hills.
Okay.
Whereas like we go to East LA, education is not as high because property tax isn't high in East LA and jobs aren't in East LA. People are driving into Los Angeles to go get work and work. So, and like just like from who's gonna shut it down? But Elon Musk has one of his the SpaceX stations in Hawthorne, and actually gave like thousands of people jobs in Hawthorne. So if you keep on doing a trend like that, putting bigger jobs into these poor communities, I feel like there could be a change. That's where my mind is at with reallocating, and also like restructuring the police department, like just trying to
I think that's a
find ways.
given for sure.
Yeah, just like education in the police department as well, and like different types of police. I feel like that's another thing of like reallocate. I feel like there should be different types of like departments in the police department where like handles different situations instead of like you call 911. There's boys in blue that
Ah,
don't really know
okay.
the certain type of situation they're in. They just act with aggressive
Yeah,
with aggression.
I've read that other countries have different numbers you call for different um, types of services that you need. And I'm not saying that that's not the case here, but yeah, it's definitely not as
There
clear.
are, I mean, there are services like that, and people are finally like posting on social media and stuff like that, which is great. But like, it's like, what are you taught when you're a young kid? Call 911 if you're in trouble. Call 911. So it's just like, I guess it's just so
Sure.
like in our system. So I don't know. But yeah, going back to the whole, that's what I believe. Putting it into property, into poor communities with low property tax, and it's like more of like a 10-year plan where it's like you first put jobs in there, restructure neighborhoods, bring the money up with I mean if it works, it's like it's a big if because
So you're kind of talking about housing, yes?
yeah, I'm talking about housing, but at the same time also job opportunity for minority communities where there's not that much job opportunity. Like there's usually just like like your regular job that you make a low minimum wage, you can't really go high without it like a degree. You know what I mean? I like
Okay.
succeed or like progress in that type of field. So I just feel like if we really invest in just property and housing, yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Did someone Azar?
I would agree with that. I think it's kind of you have to attack it from so many different angles at the same time. It's not like a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
I definitely think education for, the public and mental health services and drug abuse, like our addiction services, are very important as well because that's one of those are some of the main reasons that people end up getting arrested is for a lot of it is for um, drug addiction and as well as mental health um, kind of outbursts when it gets really bad. Um, but then also attacking things like poverty and homelessness as well. Um, and then just kind of not only restructuring police, but restructuring the entire criminal justice system
Yeah.
because,
Hmm.
the reasons why the police are arresting people is also because of obviously laws. And, maybe not criminalizing uh, drug kind of,
Right.
you know,
The answer to everything
any
isn't like going to prison.
Yeah, exactly. So just kind of finding different services to help people because that's kind of what, you know, we would all like the police to do is to
Right.
be able to help the community and also to, have police that come from your own community and not from other communities who don't understand um, kind of what a community is going through and doesn't have the investment um, in where they're policing.
So, you're saying like you have one member of like a city be a police in that city, and
Yeah,
more specifically, like if it's, I don't know, Hawthorne, like you have a Hawthorne police department filled mainly with people who live in Hawthorne. Is that correct?
yeah. I
Okay.
would hope that would, I mean, at least to get a majority, and to allocate police officers based on where they live.
It makes sense. I think, yeah, you're right in pointing out that it's not, oh, we put a little bit here, we put a little bit there, and then everything gets fixed. It's like we kind of need to start from scratch in a way. We need to rethink the entire criminal justice system, as you've said. The problem with police is one thing, but like you were talking about on previous podcasts and off stream, there's an entire criminal justice system that proceeds, let's say getting arrested or whatever may happen. So it is important to think about that. And even though we're talking about specifically reallocating police funding today, they go hand in hand. So it's definitely on point. Before I shared,
and I
go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I think that the reason why a lot of the discourse is about police is because they're kind of the closest to the public, and that's why everyone's talking about policing. Not to say that it's not very important, but I think that, everything needs to happen together, parallels. Yeah.
Agreed. Before I mentioned kind of what I wanted to see, Monica, did you want to share something?
Yeah, so I think Keon and I think Zara mentioned this before, but I personally would reallocate the funds into education because I don't know if you guys know this, but police get like a lot more than education does. And a lot of the education funding comes from like lottery ticket sales, which is really random in my opinion.
Did you know that, guys? When she told me,
No,
I was blown away.
I did not know that. You're saying a lot of education when it comes from lottery ticket sales?
I don't think the whole budget comes from lottery ticket sales. I mean, obviously, like the budget comes from government and taxpayers and like whoever's in your city, like whatever they vote on your teacher budget. But when you have the California lottery, for example, a lot of the money that you make from that money goes into education. I think 25 to 35% of the profits. And what we're seeing now, which is what I heard on the news, is that since we're in quarantine, a lot of people aren't buying lottery tickets. So they said that could be like $125 million that aren't going to schools.
Wow.
And I think that's a problem because we shouldn't be depending on lottery ticket sales. We should be having, like a set amount of money that we should buy. And I don't think teachers should be buying their own supplies for classrooms because, that comes out of our money, that comes out, and our pays aren't even like that good to start with. So that's where I would reallocate the funds to.
Definitely. Teachers are they serve like one of the most important roles in society, like educating the youth. The fact that our education system has limitations that are arbitrary, like this, like just not being properly funded, teachers buying their own supplies, that's it's a shame, and it cripples future generations. Access to education is like a right, supposedly, but we don't treat it as such. One thing that shocked me is the difference between the pay in LAUSD and Orange County. Monica was sharing with me, like, oh yeah, my starting in one district would be equivalent to having a master's and having worked in 3 years in this other LA district. It's like,
yeah. So, I mean, I think that's kind of what going on to like what Keon was saying, where the higher property taxes really determine how much money each district gets. So the district that I want to teach at is the one like literally next to my house. And, that's where I went to school. So I have a really deep connection. And fortunately, I'm not in a position where I need to make a lot of money because, my parents are pretty comfortable. And I think that's a privilege. But you have other people who are applying to Newport Beach and Irvine and Fountain Valley. And I think Laguna Beach is the highest paid district in the entire state. And those places are going to get the best teachers because teachers want more money. And the rest of the places like, East LA, you see that there's a lot of teachers who come from like Teach for America or AmeriCorps or something like that, where you just kind of get random teachers who, out of the kindness of their heart, want to work for these places. But for the most part, the great teachers are going to the richer people, and the underprivileged communities get a lot of they lack a lot of science, tech, engineering classes, and they're just not suited to succeed as much as those people are.
Monica, it's funny, you just mentioning that now made me realize why like all my teachers from high school had long commutes.
had long what?
Commutes to school. Like I remember like always my teachers like complaining about traffic and being like it takes them like an hour and a half to get here and stuff. I'm like, bro, like why aren't you going to like teaching somewhere close to you? And then now just like figuring that out, like yeah, they just you're gonna get the best teachers at these schools because of the fact that they pay better and everything.
But I think it's
And
also really messed up that, these districts pay a lot, but they're
yeah,
still not paying enough for the teachers to be able to live there.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's,
I understand. Yeah,
it's a bad
so
situation.
it makes no sense.
Right. And she was sharing with me that sometimes the police starting salary is higher, or not sometimes, often, right?
It is.
It's higher than the teacher starting salary. So we just need to rethink our priorities. Do we want to allocate more funds into policing like a city or educating a city? And you got to think, to what extent does education replace a lot of the policing? Like if you educate a kid on let's talk about drugs. If you educate a kid on how to do drugs safely, on how to and on the negative effects of drugs, like an honest education about drugs, like how to do them safely, but also like what their effects are on the body, I think you would see that the need for criminalization of it, the need for like arresting, like you just all of a sudden you have a lot of less work for some of the police department. Kian?
Well,
I, I just think though it's just more of a complicated situation when we talk about drugs because I feel like that's the fault of the pharmaceutical companies at the
Well,
end of the day,
it's
'cause
one part of
they're-
it. One part is education. That's what I was saying. I wasn't
yeah,
saying
I
that
mean,
you
of course,
solve it with it.
education.
Yeah.
But I mean, I had a headache 3 years ago because I fractured my skull, and it was like 8 months after, and I had a terrible headache, and it was like for 24 hours, and the doctor prescribed me Valium. I think Valium,
Okay.
and I showed my parents this, and like, why the fuck are they prescribing you Valium? Like, you just have a headache. It's like, I don't know, and I'm not taking this. I'm not gonna get fucking hooked on this shit. So I just think it's just way too easy to get your hands on drugs, and especially addictive drugs that like pharmaceutical companies are just throwing out to you.
Yeah.
Doctors are just giving them prescriptions. So I think this is a bigger problem than just education because I feel like at the end of the day, like people are like, yeah, I'm not gonna take opioids if I'm not hurt or anything. But if a doctor is prescribing me this, then I mean, like he's the one that's more educated than I am. So I don't know. I, yeah, I don't know. I just feel like it's a bigger problem with the whole drug situation.
Well, actually, with the drug thing, like right now I'm in a bunch of education courses. They
Yeah.
actually, like, I just had a lecture like literally 2 days ago where there were like my teachers are super informed of like random subjects that I never would have thought to educate myself on. And like she was telling us like, oh yeah, like these kids sell drugs and this is how they get hooked on drugs and this is how you identify people who get hooked on drugs. And like when you teach students about, drugs, like when I was a kid I learned like don't do drugs and they just gave you like a random bracelet and they're like, oh, red ribbon week, like whatever. And like that's not going to do anything. And now I'm seeing that in a lot of education courses that I'm taking, you have to tell kids like this is literally what substance abuse is. It doesn't mean just like, straight crack or anything, but like it can be found in pills, it can be found in random places. So you're like actively telling kids like watch out for these things. Don't just take random medication, like read the ingredients on the things and like talk to your doctor, and don't just get advice from one doctor. If you can, like go to other doctors and see like, if this is appropriate to take, and like
Yeah.
just don't depend on all these things. And like obviously they're not going to say like, tough it out and just take a Tylenol or something, but like it's just kind of teaching them how to appropriately and safely use these drugs.
Yeah.
Which
So
it's,
I didn't mean to imply that education is everything when it comes to solving an issue like this, but that by allocating more funds towards something like education, something like like informing kids about substance abuse can get incorporated into the curriculum, and all of a sudden it makes sense. You didn't lose money. You're actually saving money by not having to do this police work, not having to have all these legislation and keep people in prisons because they did drugs. So That's what I was getting at. But definitely, you know, we could have a whole podcast about how do you stop people from ruining their lives with like bad substances, right? That's its own
I
thing.
think another link of like policing and education is like the school to prison pipelines.
Yeah.
Where you have like these um, zero tolerance policies that can get kids in schools into a lot of trouble, and then like creating this cycle of um, not putting enough resources in schools, and then them coming out and like pretty much going directly to jail because of the way that they were, you know, kind of had all of these things going against them in school. And I think reallocation of police like resources to education programs will help to stop that cycle as well.
Yeah. Keon?
I was literally about to say, like, because we were at the whole school thing, and I was like, why don't we put more time into like extracurricular activities after school instead of like home? I mean, homework, yeah, but like, I just feel like if you made your kids or made the students have to take some extracurricular activity to like sort of like teach them more than what school is teaching you, like health, drugs, sex, anything like politics, anything. I just feel like schools are just not expanding the mind, and I feel like those extracurricular activities after school or like mandatory extracurricular activities instead of homework would probably be more beneficial, I feel like, at the end of the day, for the human. Because I mean, homework at the end of the day is like grueling to everyone. It's just a longer version of what you just fucking learned today. So just a stemming off what you learned today. So you're just trying to use what you learned today. But I feel like if you learn a little bit more of like what's around you, that'd be a lot more beneficial than just learning what you've learned
Monica
right
probably
now.
has something to say about that.
Huh?
Monica probably has something to say about that.
Please.
Well,
like
you can't get rid of homework.
Oh, no
so-
shit. No shit.
So I can't do that. But actually, that's something that I'm also learning about. I don't know if when you were in math class or in school in general, when you were doing your homework, did you ever feel like the homework was related to you in any way, like your
No.
projects or anything?
No.
So what we're learning right now is that we're transitioning from doing just textbook, worksheets and whatever random, papers that they give us. And teachers are actually learning how to formulate their own lessons. So for me, like there's this whole thing called multicultural education, culturally responsive teaching, where teachers actually look at each student individually and see their different backgrounds. So for me, like I live in Orange County, and in my neighborhood where I'm planning on teaching, I know that there's a majority of Mexican kids, and I know there's a majority of Vietnamese kids, and then there's like some white kids and other races. So when I would plan my curriculum, is that I wouldn't just give like this random worksheet and be like, here, do like numbers 5 to 10 for homework. You would actually say like, we're going to do a project. So I know that a lot of my kids are really into Fortnite. So for a math activity, I'd be like, okay, like use what you learned from area, perimeter, and make your own Fortnite map. And, it's just a lot of stuff to get them engaged in what they're doing, and they don't really know that they're doing math. And then also with social media, you're actually using that, and they're like, okay, like let's make a contest. Whoever has like the most likes on their Instagram post for their TikTok about math, like will get a prize or something like that. Like just making stuff fun. And it kind of goes into what Keon was saying, like, doing these extracurriculars. So for Red Ribbon Week, where you're learning about drugs, you can say like, okay, like we're going to do a math activity, do a report on drugs and all your findings of drugs. And it just means a lot more to the students because they're not only getting educated, but they're getting educated outside of their content area. And they're learning new tools, which I didn't learn in school. And I really struggled with when I was in college, where I was like forced to say, this is where you have to apply your knowledge. And, when you learn early on how to apply that knowledge instead of just memorizing everything that you need to, it helps the kid grow into like a better human being, because they're learning to think for themselves, not just thinking for the sake of some standardized test.
So
I don't know if that
Well
answers your
said.
question.
yeah, I think we're gonna revisit all of these topics, but I wanted to quickly yeet in what I thought and where I thought we could reallocate a lot of police funds. I think public housing, helping solve the homelessness crisis. I think that's such an underlooked issue because the issue with the homeless is that people view them as like secondary humans. They don't view them as one of us. And that's a shame because uh, they don't have the resources to reintegrate into society. It's like once you're homeless, unless you are really smart and you have like someone you can reach out to, it's tough to break that cycle. And you hear it all the time. Your parents, your relatives, your friends. It's like, oh, homeless people are just addicted to drugs. That's why they're homeless. It's like it's not the only reason. There are hundreds of reasons why people become homeless. Housing, affordable housing, is one of them. There was a statistic I heard on John Oliver's recent last week tonight that a majority of Americans use 70% of their paycheck for rent. 70% of their paycheck for rent. Okay, that doesn't include what they eat, which is also a necessity, or how they commute, or I don't know, saving. Are they allowed to save? So, yeah, I think I like what Keon was saying about housing, public housing, affordable housing. Those all go a long way. And then, of course, specific programs to help homeless people not become homeless, or preventing people from becoming homeless, helping homeless reintegrate into society. Those are two things that are really underlooked, and especially in LA. LA is really like I think one of the epicenters of the homeless crisis as well as the housing crisis. So I need to educate myself on how exactly the funds would be allocated and what it would be most effective to go into. But I do know that like public housing is like severely underfunded, and how many luxury apartments does downtown LA need really? Like there is, I'm sure that it's very profitable for the person who is constructing the apartment. It's very profitable for the person who owns the apartment, but listen, I mean, you need to make room for public housing, okay, in downtown LA, in Beverly Hills, in Hawthorne, it's like everywhere. And it's
Yeah.
sad to see these cities just really brutally like opposing any measure that would quote unquote make their city look bad. And it's like it's dehumanizing to the homeless, and it's just a societal shame in my opinion. Like we should not be comfortable with that.
And it's the funny thing is that like we are comfortable with it, and like people who live in LA don't care. Like imagine 10, 15 years ago living in downtown LA, you probably have the epicenter of downtown LA, like in the middle of downtown LA where homeless people are everywhere. Now downtown LA is so gentrified that literally all the homeless people are in the back right of freaking downtown LA, and that place is becoming gentrified too. So now you're going to be pushing people away and literally like looking over the problem all the time. So yeah, like solving the homelessness issue is definitely a big thing because we're literally looking past it. We don't even give a fuck. It makes no sense to me how like we can go through even Venice. Venice 10, 15 years ago was a fucking shithole. I mean, it's still not that great, but it's gentrified as fuck, man. That place is nothing like
Yeah.
it was 10, 15 years ago. And it's like, we can change, but you gotta do it in a longer amount of time, way more spread out, so people can adapt to the change and not lose their livelihood. Like it makes no sense, and we're like completely forgetting about people that we think that they're less than us because they don't have a house or over them or a job. So it's just I agree with that. They're
And
definitely need.
a great example of this is Irvine. You go into Irvine. Why don't you see homeless people in Irvine? They escort them out of the city. And then it's like, on what grounds? They tell them to like take a hike. They like drive them elsewhere.
But
And
like when it's
everybody's
Angel
just,
Stadium.
Basically, yeah, take them to Santa Ana, like take them to neighboring cities, but you don't see homeless people in Irvine, and like it's weird. It's really weird to see. It reminds me of like a caste system in a way. It's like it's not comfortable, and I mean that's like one of the many things I don't like about Irvine, but that one in particular I have seen on multiple occasions. You just see a guy waiting in line at a fast food place. Police come, they take him out of the like what? You know, he's gonna go pay for his food. Like what are you taking him away for? Like just because he I don't know has raggedy clothes? Like is that grounds for escorting someone out of a city?
Did you hear that during COVID, they were planning on turning motels
Yes,
into
I did hear
places,
about that.
and everybody in Irvine was protesting,
Classic.
saying, "Not here." They said
And they're not
that.
even staying in the hotels. Nobody's allowed to stay in the hotels. But God forbid people are showing some humanity towards other humans. No, all for me and none for thee. And
Well,
that's
they
what
said that they didn't protest the hotel idea, just not in their city. They said
exactly.
go
But
do
that's
it
what
in
I'm
a different
saying.
city.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, oh, we support this. Just we don't want them near us. You know, like what? Well, what message does that give off?
And their excuse was, "What if they don't leave?" And I think that's just really shitty. Like, why? Like, so what if they don't leave?
And it also makes me kind of scared for the Olympics that are going to be coming up, because there's a trend of whenever Olympics come into town, that's when you give all of your homeless population a bus ticket or a plane ticket somewhere
Yeah.
one way and just ship them out
Yeah.
and make it someone else's problem.
I didn't even
So-
know that. Is that actually a thing?
Well, I mean, in
Yeah.
Brazil, like,
Wow.
like,
No,
Wow.
they
I
did it.
was so unaware of that.
They did it in Atlanta.
96?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
no,
Yeah.
but like, really, but like, I want you to think, what would the headline be if it was like, oh, instead of homeless people, it was black people? You would immediately be like, this is horrible. This is terrible. This is racist. This is prejudice. This is injustice. But because they're homeless, nobody really bats an eye. And I'm just really wondering, why is that? You know, it's not like these aren't dogs. These are humans. Like
You said, Kia, like you said, when we're taught it's just what we're taught as a young age. Like you're not born with evil.
But I don't
like,
think that excuses it, right?
evil. I mean, listen.
What if you're taught from a
kid,
young age that segregation is okay? Does that excuse it? No.
No, it does. I'm not saying it excuses it. I'm just telling you this is why people are thinking like this, because we've been told that these people are drug addicts.
Right.
That,
But like we don't even give homeless people a voice. Like they don't have social media to create hashtags. They don't have resources to start movements. So like somebody has to care for them, you know?
I mean, which a lot of people do, but sadly, there's not that much money going into those organizations that do care for these homeless people. So,
for example, I've seen Black Trans Lives Matter, which is great. I've seen Black Lives Matter. What about Black homeless lives? I'm just curious. Why isn't that trending? For example.
Well, I think the reason, I mean, it's not excusable, like Keon said, but I think the reason goes in that, you see a lot of homeless people, and, sometimes they do act in violence because of probably mental illness, which is, I'd want to do drugs if I was homeless too, because it's like I'm homeless, I need something to cope with that. So, I mean, a lot of these homeless people are drug addicts, and sometimes because they're on drugs, they might not be thinking, rationally or properly. And a lot of people just kind of excuse that, like, oh, like these homeless people are bad people. Like that's why you're homeless, because you did drugs or you weren't studying hard in school and all these reasons.
Yeah.
But I think that, I think the drug addictions and stuff aren't necessarily a factor of homelessness rather than just kind of a consequence. Like, I'm homeless. I have no job. I have no place to live. Like, I don't know how I'm going to cope with this depression. I need to take some drugs. And like, that's the only that's the only getaway I can get from this reality that I'm living.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because of that, a lot of parents are saying like, oh, like, don't be this homeless person. Like, this is bad, which is true. You don't want your kid to be homeless. You want them to have a nice home. But I don't think it's right to say like, oh, don't, because homeless is something that anybody can be. regardless of who you are. Like you
Yeah.
can be rich and spend all your money on blow and just lose all your money overnight. And I think that's why it's different between the Black Lives Matter movement, because you can't tell somebody don't be black. Or at least you can try to, but it's not going to work, because you're pointing at a specific category of people who cannot change who they are. And a lot of people think homeless people can change themselves, and it's just not the same situation.
Mm-hmm. Zara, what were you
And I
gonna say?
think going off of what Monica was saying, just like, nobody wants to be homeless, so nobody wants to deal with it and like
Yeah.
have it in front of their face and like have it in front of their mind.
Yeah.
So they'd rather like make it someone else's problem. They don't want to have to think about it. They don't want to think about like, what if I was in that position? Because yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, it's like unthinkable for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But yeah, already we've identified like 4 ways that crucially like they desperately need support. And we haven't even mentioned like, I don't know, youth services. We haven't mentioned like, go ahead. Did someone want to say something?
Imagine Jeff Bezos' tax going into the homelessness problem, bro. Like it would solve so many, like just any type, the 1%'ers tax, like let's take like a fourth of that, or like even an eighth, or not even an eighth, maybe a little bit of that, and that can help the homelessness crisis problem. I feel like again, we live in a society where you can make as much money as you can, or you can lose as much money as you can, and it's sad that it goes both ways, and that the people who are making a lot of money aren't really contributing to the fact that people aren't making anything or are struggling to find a home. So it's sad reality, because people say we care, I care. It's like, I care, but I wish I could put money into it, but I don't have the money. But there's billionaires and trillionaires that preach that they care about people and everything, but they don't really invest in the right stuff. So I just feel like a lot of people should be investing a lot of their money into things. Or taxes. I mean, like there should be like a tax incentive that's in place, so the 1%ers go give money to whoever needs it. Like, I mean,
There's no tax incentive?
I don't think there's a tax incentive for the homelessness.
Well, in terms of donating, there's a tax incentive.
Is there?
Like when you donate, I believe it's a write-off, something like that.
That's what I thought.
But what I hate
it
about
right?
donations and everything is just like, it's usually for marketing's sake. It's like
100%.
the people who work there, they don't know where the real issues are. They're not on the ground. They're not grassroots. Like they don't know where all of these funds should be going. They're just making a donation to make themselves look good. And I think like,
Yeah.
it's just kind of pathetic. It's a pathetic like way of helping. And I would agree with like, I think the state knows better where, for the most part, where like the real problems are. And then like, as long as you vote and like keep your government like held responsible for where those like taxes go, like I think that's a much better system than like this corporate social responsibility bullshit. And I used to want to go into that, and then I just like saw that it's really bullshit. It's
What's the
pathetic.
term for it? Or what's that term? Because I
Corporate
just recently
socialism?
came upon that term. What is it called?
Corporate social responsibility.
Yeah, corporate social responsibility. But is that the term where it's like they're making a facade, they're like investing in something, but they don't really believe in the cause? Is that what the
No.
There was just a definition
Virtue
of a term I
signaling?
just
Virtue signaling?
Yes, virtue signaling. That fucking word. Yeah, I just learned that word. I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, yeah, it's basically like free advertising. And it's not free because you're investing money. But
Yeah,
it's
I
like
mean, you put a rainbow over your copyrighted McDonald's logo, and all of a sudden, a bunch of gay people are going and buying your food instead of going to Chick-fil-A. Whoa, fucking what a concept! So,
Yeah.
I guess that's.
Virtue.
How about guys? We take a quick break. I want to fill up my water bottle. I'll have some water. We can use the restroom, chill out, and we'll be right back. Sound good? All right, going on a break. See you soon. Okie dokie. We are back from our break. Everybody was able to use the restroom, get some water, and freshen up so that we can conclude our conversation. We can revisit, actually, some of the topics that we felt were not elaborated on enough, maybe. Actually, I wanted to look back at revamping the criminal justice system, and I know that you're pretty well informed about that, Zara. Do you want to maybe give us a bigger picture about, other than just reallocating police funding, what would it take for you to revamp the criminal justice system in America?
Wow, what a brilliant, huge question
I know
that
it's
I'm
a
gonna
lot.
answer
It's a
right
lot.
now.
Yeah, but just
But
some part of it at least.
so in the dissertation that I'm currently writing, I am focusing on different ways that criminal justice law interacts with people who are being incarcerated.
Mhm.
And so, of course, kind of the um, first interaction is with the police, which we've spoken about. And then the next is usually the prosecutor, state prosecutors. And they're the ones who, they don't really have any laws regulating what they should do and what they should decide, what kind of crimes they're going to convict with. They don't, I mean, you can read more up on it, but just the fact that they have limitless power, more than judges, more than like police, more than anyone. So that needs to be checked. Then there are like judges, where there are several things. I think for the most part, judges are in fairly good standing compared to a lot of the other problems that there are. And then of course there's once you get into prison, and one thing that I think people don't realize is that I think it's less than 10% of US prisons are private. And I know that that's sometimes a big argument for people, that the US has private prisons, which should be like taken out. But there is a bigger picture there as well
I didn't know
of
that.
federal prisons
Yeah.
that need to be addressed. And then finally, laws, kind of, the war on drugs, and what we decide kind of minimum sentencing is, because minimum sentencing does not take into consideration specifics for individuals and what's going on. And
how about pregnancy, right?
yeah, it's honestly, it can be really depressing, kind of the stories. I recommend everyone reads Just Mercy. I know it's been been on a lot of these lists for what you need to read and what you need to watch and what you need to listen to. But that is one of my favorite books and has inspired me so much about what is wrong with the criminal justice system, and it tells it in a way of personal stories and personal accounts from the perspective of a civil rights lawyer. And it's not, it's an easy, I mean, it's not easy in terms of it's heavy, but it's it's not all about facts and figures. It's about how the criminal justice system personally affects individual lives. So that's kind of an overview of like what, it's kind of like a tree where, policing, that's what we see so often, but really like there are some deep roots down there that also are rotten. So yeah.
So, one area that always, I don't know, I guess I always focus on when we're on this topic is the fact that even if, let's say, you've gone to prison, once you re-enter society, you really don't re-enter society. That's messed up. You've done your time. It's you do the crime, you do the time, so to speak. But no, you do the crime, you pay for life. Is that really fair? Is that just? I don't think so. Um, Especially the cases that bother me the most is like, let's say marijuana gets legalized in a state. Oh, this person who in 1990 something got arrested for, let's say, doing marijuana. This is still on their record. Why are we not wiping their records? Who knows? But more importantly, if you have gone to prison, if you have, um, even in our broken system, done the time, there should be a lot more resources to help reintegrate you in society, and a lot less roadblocks on every single school application, job application, any sort of application. There's always a question about your criminal history, and I'm not saying that that should not be there, but I know for a fact that criminal history question is used against these people. And I don't know what the solution is. You probably know better than I do, Zara, but I do know that it's not just for that to be the case, and somehow that has got to go.
100%. So I'm doing my dissertation on mothers who are incarcerated. So 80% of mothers who are in jail, 80% of women who are in jail are mothers of children who are minors. I've probably said that before.
Mhm.
But when these women get out of prison, and they've most likely lost custody of their children. Getting those children back is nearly impossible, and they can't apply for things like food stamps because of their convictions, and that's just really aggravating the whole problem. Where
What
it's
is
like,
even the
okay,
logic? I don't get it.
because I think it's like specifically, I believe it's drug crimes, and they're saying that like any government assistance, you're gonna be irresponsible because you do drugs.
So drugs. I mean, okay, if someone smokes weed, they're gonna get hungry. Why don't they get some food stamps? No, but on a serious note, it's like it's stuff like this that it really makes you think, like, what do we value in our society? Like, who is considered like a first class citizen? Billionaires are considered like first class citizens. They're given all the luxuries. They're given breaks. They're above the law in a lot of cases. So in that case, they're almost like they're not just citizens. They're like the lawmakers sometimes. They're not even citizens. And then the first class citizens are like your millionaires. Your second class citizens are middle class, if that even exists by the time we're working and independent, etc., and so on and so forth. So um, I just think we need to set a precedent, and it's up to us, but we feel powerless, right? Like it's always, oh, it's time for your generation. Okay, well, how do you how do you dismantle systems that have been in place for hundreds of years? How do you reform things that seem to have happened with like a slow moving power grab? It seems coordinated. Like all of these issues seem insurmountable. But I think, um, to those who ask that question, and of course I have asked that question to myself before, local politics are surprisingly effective at getting some of the measures that you want, getting your individual voice heard. I don't actually think I bring up this story too often, but when I was 13, there was T-Mobile that wanted to place a tower near the water tank in my house. And that's, if you've been to my house, there's a water tank like, up the street. It's like 50 yards away from the closest house in the neighborhood. And I did some basic research at that time on whether uh, cell phone towers could harmfully affect people. And I found that basically for young children, for like expecting mothers, and for older people, and that was actually a decent amount of our community, it could have some potential negative effects. So we like organized, we went to City Hall, and we brought this case to their attention, and over the course of like a year, finally T-Mobile did not install that cell phone tower, and that's why I have such shitty reception at my house. But also, it's why they created a law that in our city, you're not allowed to have a tower within 150 feet of any residence or a school. And hey, I mean, I was not single handedly responsible for that. There were a bunch of people in my neighborhood and nearby neighborhoods that contributed, but I felt like my voice was heard. And that's maybe not like an example of like an injustice, but it's just my anecdote of how you can get involved in local politics even if you don't know much about politics, even if you're a 13-year-old kid who just did some googling and clicked on like the first few articles. So that is what gives me like reason to be involved with politics, like to support my local community. For example, I don't know if I've talked to this about you guys. I think Monica, but maybe not everyone else. I want to do some research, figure out why LA doesn't have compost bins. And if I can't find any good reason, then say, hey, Calabasas, you've been pioneers in banning plastic bags before. Let's start this composting. Let's get this going. You know, there's a lot of food waste. Let's try to be more green about it. This is an effective way to, you know, boost the sustainability of the city. It's
I
good.
have compost bins.
You do.
Hmm.
You see, we don't. We don't. So I'm gonna look into why that is, and I'm gonna suggest it to Calabasas, and I bet they'll have either a, you know, well, maybe not a good reason, but they'll have a reason why they're not doing it, or they'll be like, why aren't we doing this? So those are some things. I guess like we always come off as like doom and gloom, but there are ways to make a difference, and I think that local politics gives me personally a lot of hope, because systemic reform seems almost impossible compared to local politics.
Also voting.
Voting, yeah, voting,
I
sure, of course.
I think that a lot of people get overwhelmed by how shit things can get and that they don't have a party that represents them and blah 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 blah. There is a lot to vote on. There's
Yeah.
not just parties and presidents. There's a lot of
Yeah.
different propositions that you get to vote on as well. And I think we get to be very privileged when we are able to have some sort of voice in our community. You know, if we have time and we have the education to understand what is, what is wrong and what we need to do about it. And I think when we have that, it's very important to just use that voice, and try and also uplift other people as well through that platform.
I actually wanted to share another anecdote. You reminded me. My mom and I voted together just so that I could share the research that I found on the candidates that I was doing on the spot. And my point right now was you can actually figure out who you want to vote for, not based off of hours of research, but by literally a simple Google search and seeing what they've done in the past. Like, it was actually surprisingly easy. You're voting for like judges. I go look, all right, this judge, it's like, what are his priorities? It's like, okay, like one, they sound good, right? Like one's like, oh, okay, I'm focused on public housing. The other one's like, oh, I'm focusing on, I don't know, something else that sounds good. I'm a specialist in like domestic abuse cases or something like that. And then you go and you see what they've supported in the past, what they've ruled in the past. And it's like obvious what their morals are, what their priorities are, and like one person wants to serve a community and one person clearly doesn't. That's usually what I found. There's not like, you don't find that spectrum in like at least LA, I guess. So it's actually surprisingly easy to do your research like on the spot and figure out who you like. And I wasn't even telling my mom who to vote for. I would just share the details of what I found, and she would decide for herself. So like, consider voting for things that you think you can't possibly know about. Well, no, it's actually surprisingly easy to vote for judges if you see like red flags, or if you see on the opposite spectrum things you really like that they have done in the past. So just try to vote. Just try to do research. Don't just circle for the sake of voting for something. There were some I didn't vote for because I was like, I can't find any info about these people. But trying and putting your effort where you can, that's like you're being a responsible citizen, in my opinion. So on that note, it does look like we are out of time. Thank you everyone for being on. I'd like to leave this opportunity for you guys to plug anything you want. Keon, we'll start with you.
Don't be afraid to express your beliefs and opinions to your peers who don't have the same opinions or beliefs that you do. Don't be afraid. Everyone has a right to express who they are and what they want to do. Obviously, the right terms. Don't be no hate speech, but hope you're doing your research and fighting for a right cause and a good cause. Thank you for listening, guys.
Of course. Monica, what's up?
I don't know. It's hard to follow Keon after he said something really insightful.
No, but you could just plug. You could just plug your Twitter or your Insta or whatever.
Okay. My Insta is @sillychili_. And then same with my Twitter if you want to see me roast conservatives.
Yeah, motherfucker.
All right.
That's dope.
Perfect. Anything else, Mon? Perhaps a drawing account?
Oh, okay. I mean, if you really want to put it, @Doodles by Meeks. I sell Kirby stickers because I'm 12.
Nah, you're not 12. That'd be illegal. Anyway, thank you for that, Mon. Zara, anything you want to plug before you got to go? You already plugged Just Mercy, but anything else?
I'm going to plug voting again because it's really important, and I think more people should vote. And also, community gardens. I'm really into gardening lately, and I think community gardens are beautiful, and it's a great way to get involved in your community or start a community garden if you don't have one. So there you go.
Boom. All of that can be found down below on the notepad. As for myself, I don't need to plug anything. You already know who I am. But if you're interested, I have a link tree. So it has links to everything you could want to see from me. That can be found on my Twitter. So just go on my Twitter @theKioJoon. You can find my link tree and follow me wherever you want. Hopefully you'll follow me on here because we have great discussions all the time. Tune in this Friday at 10:30 a.m. for another interesting podcast. The topic is whether groupthink or individual opinion has more influence and which is paramount. That should be a good one. We're going to have Oscar return. I'm not sure if these guys can make it, but I'll ask them at a later time. But for now, thank you for being in tune with Joon. It has been a great talk, guys, and have a wonderful day. Goodbye.